Morning. It is 10 o'clock and I'm going to call the Finance Committee meeting to order. And so it's time to entertain public comment. And if you come up for public comment, would you please state your name? And then you have 3 minutes to speak. Anyone for public comment? I think I asked 3 times. Public comment? Thanks, Joe. All right. And so we're going to move on for our motion to approve the consent items, including the agenda and the meeting minutes from 2022, 2023, this approval of the minutes from December 6th of 2022. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
That was easy. All right, and then we're going to move on to the action items. And do I have a motion for election of the vice chair of the Finance Committee?
Do we have to vote on that first?
Pardon me, did I go out of order?
No,
You're gonna
you're
motion.
doing good.
Go ahead.
Sorry. I'd like to make a motion to elect Jacob Ottawa as Vice Chairman of Finance and Administration for 2023.
Second.
Any other nominations?
Ms. Chair, I think we didn't vote on the consent agenda, correct?
Correct, yeah. Yeah.
Sorry. My
That's all right.
apologies.
You're okay, you just can do a unanimous vote or a roll call, or no roll call, just a voice vote.
Okay, and we have a voice vote to vote on the
Yes.
consent
Yes, thank you.
agenda items. Thank you, Commissioner Bergman. Voice vote.
Everyone in favor, say aye.
Everybody in favor, say aye.
Yep.
Thank you.
Aye.
And I watched the video too from my. Anybody opposed? All right, the ayes have it. All right, so now can we move on to the action items?
Would you like me to remake that motion?
I'd like to,
Yes.
yes, I
Okay,
would like to.
I'll remake that motion. Let's make sure we're all good. I'd like to make a motion to elect Jacob Ottawa as Vice Chairman of Finance and Administration for 2023.
But I would like to second that motion.
And are there any other nominations? And say times 3.
Mhm.
No other nominations? All right, so all those in favor, we'll go to voice vote again. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, and Jacob Bonema will now be the Vice Chair of the Finance and Administration Committee.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, action item number 2. To approve the statement of review for the month of December 2022.
So move.
Mr. Bergman, any support?
Support.
Support. Is there discussion? Discussion? Do we want to go to,
You can do voice.
pardon me,
You can do a voice vote.
voice vote? All right, so we'll go to a voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those who oppose? All right. Motion approved. Item number 3 is the interlocal prosecution agreement. Do I have a motion to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners the new interlocal prosecution agreement between Ottawa and Allegan County?
So move. Support.
Anyone opposed? Or, I'm sorry, voice vote. And all those in favor say,
Could we just get a little bit of discussion on this? just to
Yeah.
make
oh,
sure?
I apologize.
That's all right. I'm not sure if Prosecutor Fisher is here.
Is he here?
Oh,
I'm
there he is.
sorry.
Way in the back.
Yeah, just move on. So
I couldn't see
Please.
it behind Jack's head, even as he got a haircut, so.
they're
Morning,
just,
morning.
Morning.
Sorry.
Does anyone have any questions for me about this contract? For those of you I haven't met yet, I don't think I've met Commissioner Belknap. I'm Lee Fisher. I'm the Ottawa County Prosecutor.
Nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you.
I'd love to hear you just talk about it for a little bit, if you would.
Yeah, what this is for years, ever since I've been here, I've been in the office for 32 years. We have always handled the prosecutions for the county of Allegan that arise out of the city of Holland, because as all of you know, a portion of the city of Holland is within Allegan County. And the Holland Police Department Department controls the whole city there, patrols the whole city and enforces the laws down there. So anything that happens within the city of Holland, any crime that occurs within the city of Holland will be charged by our office. Those offenses will be filed with the district court, 58 District Court in Holland. And given that they're City of Holland, Allegan County, they're really Allegan County cases because they were within Allegan County, even though within the City of Holland. So what we've done traditionally over the years is we have prosecuted all of the misdemeanor cases that occur within the City of Holland, Allegan County, all the way through from start to finish. With the felony cases, we have taken those cases through the preliminary examination stage that occurs in the Holland District Court down in the city. And then once they get past the preliminary examination stage and are bound over to circuit court, then those cases are transferred down to Allegan County to their circuit court to be handled down there. So we basically handle all of the misdemeanors in that portion of the city, and then the felony cases up through preliminary examination. And we've done that for as long as I've been here. I think that the purpose for that way back in the beginning was convenience for the Holland Police Department, for their officers, so they weren't traveling all the time back and forth down to Allegan City, down to the Allegan courts to handle like minor misdemeanor cases and things like that. It would just be easier to handle them here in Ottawa County. And also for the convenience of Allegan County, for their prosecutors, not having to send prosecutors up here from Allegan to the Holland court to handle their misdemeanor cases and their felony cases. So that's the reason we do this. And the reason that we're changing the contract at this point is for as long as I can remember, and this was before I was really involved in administration of the office, but for as long as I can remember, this has been the standard fee was $75 an hour. And as you all know, with inflation and rising salaries over the years, people are making more per hour, and this this just reflects something that's probably more commensurate with what our prosecutors and support staff are being paid to process these cases, so that we're not doing this at such a bargain rate as something we might have been doing 15, 20 years ago. We're just trying to bring it more in line with what we should be charging them now based upon what we're paying people.
$75 an hour seems very inexpensive for
Yes,
legal services.
Yes.
Definitely so.
right.
Doesn't seem like a large jump either, as far as what your rate is.
No, we think it's pretty reasonable. I've not spoken yet with Myrene Cook. She's the Allegan County prosecutor, but I can't see why they would have any objection to this. I mean, it really is a nice service for them. As far as, not having to send their prosecutors up here to the Holland court and that kind of thing. So.
Wonderful. Is there any other? Commissioner
Thank you.
Southra?
Thank you, Chair. So just to clarify, this could be 105 an hour on this contract, right?
Yes, it's 105 an hour for the attorney time. And it will be $30 an hour for basically support staff, administrative staff, and all the administrative things that have to happen. So it's going to be $135 an hour.
And I think Commissioner Moss asked this relation to the parks item on planning, but how does our personnel stretch to kind of cover this service? I mean, do we have how many hours are we dedicated to this? Does that require like specific personnel, or is it just kind of fitting it in where it works out?
Yeah, it's case by case. If you've got a crime victims' rights case and our crime victim advocates are involved, so you've got them involved, you've got our support staff involved, prepare all the paperwork, subpoenaing witnesses, things like that. And then you've got the attorney time to review the case, to authorize the charges, then actually appear in court on the charges. So it really differs from case to case, how much each case is how much we're going to bill for each case.
Okay. But it is quite possible we have at least one or two folks at the 58th district who are covering Allegan per se.
Oh, yeah, we've
necessarily.
got, what do we have? 7 attorneys down in Holland. And then we've got, half of our staff is in our Holland office down at the 58th District Court building. And those are the people that are generally handling those cases. So you got 7 attorneys, you got a bunch of support staff, you got crime victims' rights staff, all in that Holland office that are handling these cases.
And 105 is covering our costs at this point, basically, or?
We believe so. I think that those calculations were probably done in concert with maybe people from your office, is that correct?
Yes, it was built on the average wages budgeted in 2023 with an overhead cost.
Okay.
There has been about 32,000 billed since 2018.
Okay,
So that's probably, 425 hours
okay.
of time.
So we're not making any money, but if we're not losing any money either. I mean, we're not
Correct.
making money off Allegan, but we're not giving them any.
I don't think the purpose was to.
Right,
make
exactly.
money,
We
but
we
yeah,
don't want
right.
that. We just want to make sure that we
Right.
come out even. So, great.
Any other questions?
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So is there a motion to approve and forward the Board of Commissioners to the new interlocal prosecution agreement between Ottawa County and Allegan County?
So moved. Second.
And go to a voice vote. Great. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed? The motion passes. And number 3 on the agenda items, we have Community Action Agency personnel request. And is there a motion to,
I'll make that motion.
thank you. Want to support
Support.
and discussion?
Good morning. I'm Jen Brzezowski with Community Action Agency. And our position request is for a full-time weatherization inspector. We currently have an open 0.6 FTE, but in order to fill the needs that we have for that program, we would need to bump that up to 1.0 FTE. You're probably wondering what weatherization is. So that program helps our low-income individuals. We have an inspector that goes into the home to find any health and safety issues in the home, any air leakage in the home, in or out. And then it provides services such as insulation, caulking around the windows, and items that kind of improve energy efficiency and health and safety in the home. Something that Mr. Gibbs and I spoke about this position previously as well.
Can I ask a question? Jennifer,
Sure.
I noticed that it's included in the budget, but then it says if it's not included, that the funding source is 60% BIL.
Correct. That's the bipartisan infrastructure law. So that-
10%. So
Correct.
what are those percentages?
So we have multiple funding sources. It's all grant funded program. So Bill is one of those, and that's our largest funding source for the next 5 years. We also have Department of Energy funding, and then the LAHEAP funding, which is Low Income Housing Energy Assistance Program.
Thank you.
That's the breakdown of the funding. Sure. Any other questions?
How many homes have you been in, say, in the last year?
Sure. Our annual goal is typically between 30 and 40. Our inspector has already been into 28 homes this year. With our new grant funding, we have to up that amount to 90. So tripling the production in that program, we will need to add another full-time employee. In addition to inspector duties, that individual also works in our housing quality standards program. We contract with community mental health and resilience to provide that service. That individual also do Lower My Bill program to go into homes and do some energy education. And the Home Energy 101 program with Holland BPW, that individual will also run that or work in those programs as well.
If citizens want to take advantage of this, is there a waiting list? How do they engage with you to do that?
Sure. There is currently a waiting list. The best option is to call our main office or online. We also have on our website, we have an application. So individuals can fill out their information and then we would assess to see if they're income eligible.
Commissioner Moss?
I have a couple questions.
Sure.
Is there ever a time where an inspection or investigation or something occurs without somebody's desire?
No, they would have to apply for the program.
It's not
So
court
it's,
mandated or?
nope, not at all.
Okay,
no,
so
it's
it's just
voluntary.
voluntary. Okay.
Correct.
And
Yes.
so if we were to add another position for approximately 85,000, and they're gonna do 85 or 90, ideally 85 or 90 per year.
Mhm.
So the county through grant funding is paying $1,000 per home. Essentially,
It doesn't necessarily work that way. Every job is a little bit different. So the inspector would be paid on an hourly wage regardless. So depending on each project, it might look a little bit different. So one home we go in and just do caulking around the window. One home might need a full attic of insulation. So the inspector's wage, is not determined upon what the project looks like.
where does the project funding come from? Let's say you need an attic of insulation,
Correct.
and it costs $5,000. Where does that funding come from?
That is from those funding sources mentioned. So the bill funding, LAHEAP and DOE, those are all federal funding sources that are funneled through us through MDHHS.
Okay, how long has this program been running in general?
Goodness, at least 20 to 30 years.
Okay.
Mhm.
And then over the 20 plus years, has there been evaluation as to whether it's been effective or helpful?
Yes, there's a lot of studies out there. So again, it's Department of Energy funding mainly, and it's given to community action agencies. We're actually a part of a national partnership. So we've seen, I don't have the numbers offhand, but there's energy savings, there's cost savings for utility bills, and there's also improved health and safety in the home. For example, for maybe a child that has asthma, if we go into the home and we see some energy leakage, or maybe there's mold or mildew in the home, those are things that we can remediate.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Go ahead and entertain a motion to approve and forward.
We already have a motion.
Oh, we already have a motion. Okay, let's do a voice vote. All of those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All of those against or opposed? Right, the motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, number 5, fiscal services personnel request. We have a motion to move to the agenda.
Sure, I'll make a motion to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners a proposal to add 1 FTE full-time benefited assistant mental health financial manager position at Universal Pay Grade 13 for a cost of $117,738 paid for with grant funding and Medicaid.
Support. Discussion.
Good morning, Karen Karasinski, Fiscal Services Director. Fiscal Services is a full support financial office. We have approximately 30 FTEs countywide. There is 10 currently embedded with community mental health. So I have 10 staff working directly with CMH leadership to support that operation. It includes billing staff for medical billing, supervisory staff to oversee the medical billing and to help the vendors manage the contracts, keeping things updated versus what we're paying on the contracts. So all of that day to day. In addition, there are a budget audit analyst, which supports the submitting of grant reports, and an account clerk that helps with payroll and time entry with the office. So really serving as community mental health finance support. I have a CMH financial manager overseeing the operation there. Her name is Amy Bodbile-Mast. This position, the assistant CMH financial manager, is intended to support Amy and manage the day-to-day operations of the finance office at Community Mental Health. With the growth in grants and Medicaid at Community Mental Health, we've seen a dramatic increase in grant reporting, in contract and billing, and there are several large projects underway that the financial manager cannot manage needs support, more support to manage the day-to-day operations, which is this position. Were there any questions?
Karen, this is an ongoing grant, right? There's no sunset to it right now.
This position, while would partially be funded by grant, it is largely funded by Medicaid.
Okay.
And thank you, Doug. That also the agenda item, I believe, was updated late, and it is currently funded. So there is Medicaid in the current appropriations. We would reallocate it to fund this position.
Okay.
Other questions? Commissioner Moss?
Question. Yeah, just generally wondered how long the need has existed, or if it's just a newer need that's been identified.
We have, when they started the Certified Community Behavioral Health Clinic, the CCBHC grant, we did add a billing clerk at that point. And so we've been evaluating this operation, working with Lynn Doyle, the CMH director, and watching because there has been so much growth. So I would say it's probably been building and partially supported through some growth already in staffing. But maybe we've been a year and a half.
Okay, and with adding this position, is like the financial outlook potential for more grant funding or being able to more quickly apply for grants or anything like that? Just wondering.
Yeah, so CMH really has a grant writer on staff. So we support that grant writer. As fiscal, we do not write the grants. We just help manage them.
Thanks.
And one might think, since we are the fastest growing county in Michigan, that our community mental health needs will increase as well. Services. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Go to a vote. Voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The agenda item passes. All right, item number 6. Suggested motion to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners a proposal to change one FTE to a full-time benefit maintenance worker position at Universal Pay Grade 5 to a maintenance technician at Universal Pay Grade 7 for a total cost of $8,140.38. This is a request for facilities personnel. Have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
And time for discussion?
Good morning. I'm Blake Upright, Facilities Director for Ottawa County. I've met some of you, so it's good to see you again. The need that we have up in Grand Haven is we currently have the Grand Haven Courthouse, the Fulton Street building, along with the Beach Street clinic that we lease. Currently, we have 2, as defined by job description, semi-skilled maintenance workers up there. The maintenance tech level is a slightly higher level as described by the job description. That is I guess as it is described in the job description, it's fully skilled instead of semi-skilled. So what this allows us to do is currently we're down to 1 person up there because we had retirement. But prior to that, we had an individual up there who did tech level work, but did not get compensated for it. They were working outside their job classification. They were promoted to another job within facilities. So it's left us with a lag of skill and services up there. So in order in the current market out there to recruit good talent, I would like to upgrade this to that level so that we can appeal to a more talented group of service workers.
Are there questions? Thank you.
Nope.
Easy
Okay.
enough. So hearing no questions, we'll go to a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. All right. Agenda item number 7 is the fiscal year 2023 budget adjustments. And the motion is to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners the 2023 budget adjustments per the attached schedule.
So move.
So moved. Mr. Strickland?
Support.
Support. Ms. Niedermeyer? Opportunity for discussion. Hi, Karen.
I just a little background on the budget amendment process. So we start the budget process. I know we have a discussion item to have an overview of the budget process later, but we start the budget process and departments make requests in May and June. And so we're making requests and then it continues to move forward. We're balancing, presenting, and then adopting for a start on October 1st. When we're doing those things so early, there are estimates made for ongoing grants. So a grant that we receive every year, we would generally expect that to continue unless we hear otherwise. There's some grants that we know we're going to receive so that business can start on 10/1. We make those estimates of what we think the grant amount will be. And then that allows that operation to start. And what you see in a lot of budget adjustments are truing that up to what our estimates were versus what we thought maybe when we first started, or on occasion, we get new grants that we just hear about during the year. So you'll see those as well. Or you may see where we had a grant, we knew the amount, but then they've decided to give us a supplement or a little bit extra. So we try to provide us a summary of what those grants are to give you an idea of what it is that we're funding and changing. But this is really just to, we make an estimate and then move forward. So I almost think, with the exception of a few small ones, almost all of these are grant adjustments that are before you today.
Is there discussion or questions?
I have a couple items.
Sure.
Here on 4-114, that's the one that says increase Lakeshore Regional Entity Grant Award for Substance Use Disorder for Prevention and Treatment within the community. The total grant was $91,925. And I just noticed a $600 difference between revenue and expense. And I just wondered if you could explain that a little bit.
Sure.
Okay.
So when we do those estimates, we like revenues and expenses to balance, because the grant is generally funding some expenses. So this isn't a case where two things happened. One, we were off by $600. There must have been a late adjustment to some expense and we were not in balance. So we're correcting that. These are actually PA2 that the county receives from the state. That's convention and facilities tax money that we receive from the state. 50% of that is restricted for substance use support. And we have to send 50% to the Lakeshore Regional Entity, which is the county's holder of those grant funds. They are restricted for Ottawa County. The LRE then grants back to private agencies. And then one of those agencies is also public health and community mental health. So there's kind of a circle back to the county. So this is additional grant funds that they receive through that process. And then we're balancing where we were off.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Other questions?
I have a couple more if that's all right.
Oh, good.
Okay, so I have two more. 4-187 Parks and Recreation. It just talks about recognizing the donation from Ottawa County Parks Foundation to fund full-time coordinator of fund development and major gifts. The amount represents year 1 of 3-year grant. So talked about 73,000 currently came in, from my understanding, and the expense is 110. My guess is just, it's the catch-up part of it of where it's at, or
This, it was intentional that grant was partially funding that position, and that grant contract, I think, was discussed at a previous meeting. It went through, and the remainder of this is to be funded by the Parks millage, as was always the intent.
Perfect, thank you. I think just my other one is just understanding the 4-197. Just wondering if you could give a little more description. Currently, it says appropriate funding for equipment modification fee for the Manley Street and Fillmore cell towers. The fee will be used to pay the tower management consultant to review the plan. Just wondering if you can just expand on that one a little bit.
So this is, the county has, I think there are 3 cell towers in the county where we have communication. We have contracts with communication companies to place their equipment on our cell towers, and so they pay the county. At this particular tower, they want to do some modifications. We have a consultant that will review that. So there is an application fee for that change. And then that consultant is also paid the application fee because they're the ones that are supporting us in reviewing that application and the changes that they're proposing to make on our towers.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Karen, I'm very impressed with your vast knowledge of all the
Mhm.
projects that are going on in the county.
Thank you.
Truly. Thank you to the level of detail. All right. So I have a motion on the floor. We go to vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion passes. All right, so we're going to move on to discussion items. And I would like to add one other, if we could, so I don't know if we need to amend the discussion items, but it's pertaining to scheduling conflicts for future meetings.
I will make that motion to add an agenda item regarding the February 14th meeting.
Thank you.
Support.
Do we need a voice vote on that one? Sure. Yep. All those in favor for adding the scheduling conflicts as one of our discussion items to the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, scheduling conflicts is added. So number 1 in the discussion items is our treasurer's financial month-end update, and that is Mrs. Amanda Price.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Amanda Price. I'm the county treasurer. I haven't had a chance to meet all of you yet, but hope to work with you well in the coming year. So the information you have before you is the Treasurer's Finance Committee report. It's an informational report for you on a monthly basis. I want to just explain how the treasurer's office works a little bit. We operate very much under state law, and primarily Public Act 20 of 1943, which is entitled the Investment of Surplus Funds of Political Subdivisions Act. So that act does 2 things. It outlines what kinds of investment the treasurer's office can make. So for instance, we can do bonds, securities, and other obligations of the United States government. We can invest in certificates of deposit and savings accounts. We can invest in municipal bonds, obligations of the state or its political subdivisions, which would be school districts, other counties. I'd love to invest in our county, but because we have such a great bond rating. However, so secondly, the PA 20 outlines that every unit of government should also have an investment policy. So we do have one of those. It was recently revised last year just to update it. We have 5 tenets in that policy. Most counties or most local units of government have 3: safety, liquidity, and yield. Ours also includes 2 others: management of risk and return on investment. So those 5 tenets. So that's when we go to invest in some security, we are looking at those criteria before we select something. And as this information is new to you, I thought I'd walk you through what you're seeing. And I've given you a packet of information because I know the thing that came across is very small on your computers. So we'll walk through this together. This large pie chart that everybody can see, it is the pooled cash accounts as of 12/31/23. This means that all the funds in the county are pulled together for this reporting. So that's what that chart represents. We're going to go to the bar chart, which is here, this one. It represents the historical balances in the general pooled funds over the course of the last 4 years, plus sometimes of this fiscal year. Next chart, the green chart, that I call the green chart, is the yield chart. This one. That shows you how our portfolio compares to other benchmarks that we compare our portfolio with the market and also with last year's yield on our accounts. And then finally, the investment distribution by maturity chart. This one shows you that this is the length over which we have our investment. So you'll see the large red bar chart. A lot of stuff is kept very short because we have to meet primarily payroll, accounts payable. So those things, and then we invest over here. This is our longer term portfolio in the blue bar. Also included in your packet is the County of Ottawa Retiree Healthcare Trust Statement. You'll wonder why you're getting this from the treasurer. I am the trustee. The treasurer of the county is the trustee for the, I call it the OPEB trust, but it's the County Retiree Health account. So this information comes from you. I'll just read this to you because it's not fermented in my brain right now. The retiree health insurance plan was established and is being funded under the authority of the county and under agreements with unions representing various classes of employees. The county's funding policy is that the county will contribute recommended amounts as determined by an actuarial evaluation. As of 2022, there are 940 members of that. And so continuation of medical and dental coverage is offered to retirees who are at least 60 years of age with 10 years of service or 50 with 25 years of service. And then there's also an exception for unclassified benefited employees. So you will also receive a copy of that every month. And finally, I also provide you a one-page document, which you'll see on the top of the papers that I put before your desk today. Just an update of what I believe are market conditions, what are the unemployment rates, foreign and domestic, possible influencers on the markets right now. So I may have confused you all. But I just wanted to make sure this is one part of what the treasurer's office does. When you make your tour around this morning, I will hope to explain what the other portions of our office do. So, thank you.
Thank you. Question for you, Amanda.
Yeah.
What are you most proud of in your role as treasurer here at the county?
I think I'm most proud of my staff and my team. They just are remarkable people, highly qualified, really dedicated to what they're doing. And wow, if you have questions for them, it's like, how fast can they get it for you? So it's really great team to work with. Very proud of them.
It's wonderful. One other question too. So on that note, what can we help you with as we're a new slate of county commissioners? I know I'm taking you off guard.
No,
I'm just curious.
I think Jacob asked me this question before, you know, if there's anything we need. Typically, if we identify something, we're a group of people that will find a way to get the assistance we need. And I'll just and I'll share this with you too. Since we've been there, we've done a lot of technology upgrades in our office, and that has come at the recommendation of not only our bankers, but helping to control costs. So I'll think about that question and just let you know, but we're pretty good right now, but we'll let you know.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
And since I went first, are there any other questions? I appreciate the large print.
Oh.
I
I need it.
Graders out right away. when I got it.
That was a question, though. I know, sorry to take your time doing that. The charts that I give you are very small, and I'm wondering if I should put them in a one-page format so that you can look at them more easily.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do that. Thank you.
I have one question.
Yes.
Just generally, if you look at 2023 in comparison to the last several years, how do you feel about the financial position of Ottawa County?
We are getting better. I'll just tell you, during the COVID recession, I was buying securities at 0.40 basis points. Now we can buy US government securities at 4%. Like, thank you. It's just, and other things you should know, we tend to hold, or we do hold all of our investments to maturity. So while it's very tempting to try to sell some of these things, we've never done that before. So Karen probably would say, no, go sell it, but that's not how we work. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And moving on to the current status of the ARPA funds. Now this request, I'm sorry, and did I need to, can we handle this whole, like the discussion items as a one at the very end? Is that?
Yeah, there's no motions or anything with
No
discussion.
motion, perfect, okay. So request was, and this was my request, and it's from my constituents, just wanting to know the current status of our ARPA funds, and Karen has been kind enough to provide that information.
So just while those are coming around, as you know, the federal government, the president passed the ARPA, the American Recovery. I'm sorry, I can never remember this acronym. American Rescue Plan, American Rescue Plan Act. Thank you. In 2021, we received as a county of, it was based on population, but we received a direct payment from the federal government for half of that, what we were allotted for, which was almost $7 million. So we received 28 million back in June of 2021. In August of 21, there was a task force created to work on a plan to use these resources within the county. That group started meeting, I think, in the fall of 21, and identified really there are 5 main areas: affordable housing, social, human, business stabilization, and then there was county needs and broadband. So all of this was happening as the federal government was still really finalizing the rules on how this would be spent, what the reporting requirements would be, what the subrecipients who receive grant funding, what their responsibilities would be. So all this was kind of happening at the same time. In the ARPA task force, as outlined on the website, identified those main areas where they felt the county would be well served to use these funds. And then they did a survey. I can't remember exactly the time frame of the survey, but the survey kind of confirmed some of their beliefs. That ARPA task force in early 2022, we deemed that we wanted to work specifically with what we called bucket managers. So we did a request for proposal for bucket managers to take in applications, review those applications, and come back and make a recommendation to the task force on how those grants should be awarded. So all of that was happening as the final rule for the federal funding was delivered. I think that didn't come out until spring of 22. So we had our actual dollars in the bank before we even had the final rules for what all the requirements were. So this is a financial update. So I focused on the financial piece. If there are specific application questions, we may need to come back again. So the first page that I provided is really a summary of how we worked the money. So we had the ARPA funds in that orange category, 57 million. The expenditure categories that were eligible are off to the right. So these were allowable expenditure categories under the Act. So public health, negative economic impact, service to disproportionately impacted communities, premium pay, infrastructure, and administration and others. So those were identified by the federal government and revenue replacement. You'll notice revenue replacement is highlighted because revenue replacement was a calculation that you had to go through. It basically a line by line on how to calculate. So if the county had lost money during the pandemic, they were allowed to use their grant money to replace that revenue. And really the main criteria is that it needed to be spent on services, direct services to the community. So there's probably a little bit more to that, but from a very large perspective, it's main services to the community. So if you had lost revenue, according to the calculation, you could use the funding to replace that revenue. We did those calculations, and in 2020, we had, so that you would do the calculation for the 2020 year, 2021, 2022, and if you had lost revenue, that is the amount that you could use of your allocation. So we did that calculation. It's based on a calendar year of 2020, and our about $19 million was calculated as the county had lost revenue. Our revenue should have been $19 million higher based on our earlier year's trends than it was. So 19 million of our 47 million or 57 million could be used for that purpose. So what that means is so if you go down to revenue replacement, that is an eligible category. So this is the green circle now. I'm on my picture, green circle. The revenue, we must follow the federal guidelines. So we had to follow the federal guidelines to spend it. It must be expended or committed by 12/31/24. Expenses, we need to submit reports to Department of Treasury. So we need to report on what we're spending on. And then a single audit. So any federal funds that you receive are audited with something called a single audit. So when our independent audit firm comes in every year and looks at the county records, there's like an extra audit of any federal funds we receive. So that is all subject to this revenue replacement and submitting reports. So if you then look at the summary schedule I gave you, the short one, it talks about the ARPA allocation. So this is, you can see from our at the top, I have our 56.6 million. So that is the amount of grant dollars the county received. You can see the projects that were identified. So the first project that we spent our lost revenue on was public safety payroll. So over the course of, I think we started that project in 2021 and continued into 2022. So we spent $19 million and we reported that to the Department of Treasury, public safety payroll. There are rules surrounding reporting payroll, and we complied with those and submitted those as expenditures of ARPA dollars. So we did the same thing for 2021. So we did our lost revenue calculation again in 2021, and we had 20.7 million. So the calculation stated that we should have had 20 million more based on our history of what our revenue growth had been. So we had additional projects approved by the board. So you'll see there are 4 more projects number 2 through 5, public safety payroll, court services, prosecuting attorney, and clerk services. So those projects were all approved by the board. They were calculated and reported in fiscal services. So you'll see the public safety payroll, we still have, so as in this report, the expended amount, this is really as what we reported already to the Department of Treasury. So public safety payroll line 2, we still have not reported the first quarter of 2023. So those reports are due by the end of this month. And we have an additional $2.3 million of public safety payroll that we could submit, and then that project could be closed out. So the thing about these projects is these projects were projects that were funded and resulted in budgetary savings. So by using federal dollars, we then experienced budgetary savings in our budget, because when we adopted our budget, we adopted a balanced budget. We then got this ARPA money, submitted these projects. So we had 37 million in budgetary savings from these ARPA grants so far. So that kind of brings me back to my third circle on this sheet, is then you have revenue replacement savings. The board had made a decision that based on these budgetary savings, they wanted to commit these resources to initiatives that the ARPA task force was considering. So the benefit of doing that is the board determines how the funds will be spent. They can only spend with board action. The board establishes the reporting criteria, and we weren't subject to that 12/31/24 end date that had been established by the federal government. So we could, we were not limited to that. Additionally, the final rule went through several reiterations, and they did make it easier as time went on. But a few of those first final rules that came out were extremely administratively burdensome. Maybe they would have required an incredible amount of administrative support. We might have had to hire more accountants. The grant recipients would have also had to hire people as well, just to comply with the requirements of the grant. So we felt like we were allowed to spend more of those dollars on things that were important to the community, as opposed to administrative support, which is the other reason that we went through this process. So the ARPA allocation is substantially spent are substantially committed to those main projects. We have three, 6, 7, and 8, which are I'm kind of back to my summary sheet here about ARPA dollars. I don't know if you're able to follow. There were 3 projects approved, contracts approved in November that were projects that were approved strictly as ARPA grant dollars as opposed to savings. And the reason for that is because they were projects that were kind of outside normal county authority. And so when Corporation Council wasn't comfortable with having them spent with budgetary savings, we reverted back and made ARPA. And so the board still wanted to continue on with these projects. We funded them with ARPA contracts. So there are contracts for those 6, 7, and 8, that BizStream Academy, the ODC network, and Earn and Learn. And those projects, because it was a specific grant that the county was making, we hired a consultant, Guidehouse Consulting, that is helping the county, one, make sure that they're compliant with the federal regulations, making sure that we're doing everything that we need to do on our end, and making sure that the subrecipients of those funds recognize what their responsibility is as well. So we are still in the process of going through that with those 3 grantees. But contracts were approved by the board to set that up in November. So really, those are committed projects. The only way that I think at this point that is the contract would be problematic for the grantee is if they were deemed ineligible under the federal guidelines, because everything was contingent on the federal guidelines and complying with those. So at the bottom, it talks about the balance of ARPA dollars. So this is the official ARPA funds that were granted to us, 8.6 million. So we would have another opportunity to calculate lost revenue again at 12/31/22, which we could do. Usually we do those calculations in about March timeframe after our audit is complete. If there's any audit adjustments, making sure that we have everything so we can look at the full picture, and then we would be able to identify if those are lost revenue. And I do believe, just based on the trend, that those dollars would be again deemed as lost revenue available for the board to take action on. The second page, the second summary, is a little longer set of projects. So if you recall from my comments earlier, the dollars that we had submitted for the public safety payroll and the court and payroll, that resulted in $37.4 million of budgetary savings. The board took those funds and committed them to the ARPA task force efforts. So still in line with the desire to achieve those objectives. So the budgetary savings from ARPA task force, you see I carried that over to that next page. Those, and then all the projects that have been approved to date for under these county, there are now county dollars, county budgetary savings that the board has committed to this effort. Committed funds is a technical accounting term that only the board can do and only the board can undo. So it was a very specific action that the board took to commit these resources to this initiative. So some of these projects, as you can see, I have the project amount, and then I have the amount paid, and then over is the amount encumbered. So that's a contract balance or something that remains committed to that effort, but isn't yet paid. And then you have the balance available. So these projects, a few like 1 through 1 through 7 happened earlier, and then really 7 through 29 happened just after the task force came forward in the fall. So I think those were at the board's November meeting, those projects were established and funded. We did get news that the project number 3, which was the dwelling place. And, oh, no, I'm sorry.
Number 4.
Project number 4. Thanks, Doug. Project number 4 is Samaritas. That was a affordable housing initiative in Spring Lake. And that contract, I think was approved like in August, July or August. And it was contingent upon receiving additional funding from the state. So there's a grant program, affordable housing projects go through with the state of Michigan. They do it a couple of times a year. The contract allowed them to go through 2 of those processes. A Samaritas, we just did hear that theirs was approved, so that contingency will be removed, and this $1.5 million will be matched with other grant dollars for that initiative. We have not received I haven't received formal notice, but we have heard. And then the dwelling place, we have not heard about that one, but that was also submitted in this fall process with the state that allows funding for affordable housing. And that one, I believe, is in Holland. Number 7 is the inflationary impact payment. And when the board approved that, we estimated a project budget. And if you can see that we only used a portion of that. So there is 602,000 remaining. And that's really complete. We've done all those transactions and that's complete. There are a number of projects that are underway and have open encumbrances that we've just made the first payment to the grantee, and we're just waiting for the activity to begin and for them to file additional reports. So the $37.4 million in budgetary savings has been 36.5 of that has been committed to these projects, of which some of them, like the inflationary payment, has a balance and that would not be spent. And so that would revert back to those committed savings. And so, but with those minor adjustments, there's 896,000 remaining in board initiatives.
Thank you very much for a very thorough explanation. Commissioners, you have questions? Commissioner Zelstra?
Thank you. The guidehouse contract, at least last meeting, was only 15,000. Is that just kind of a down payment, or how deep are we going to get into this 830,000?
I'm sorry, which one?
The guidehouse contract number 29.
Oh, right. So the guidehouse contract number 29, that's the consultant that we hired to support those ARPA projects and help us make sure that we're complying. We're much better at getting dollars in and answering everyone else's questions. We wanted to make sure we complied when we were actually the grantee. We don't usually find ourselves in that situation. That the 15,000 was the phase 1 of that project, which was to establish eligibility. So review the projects, establish eligibility, which is currently what we're doing. And so once that's complete, we have a phase 2, which would be what are the exact steps that have to happen to make sure that we're compliant? Who's going to do those steps? Are we going to do it in-house? Or is Guidehouse going to support us to do that initiative? We had set that budget, if you remember, at 10% of the cost of the projects, just very randomly. I don't know what phase 2 will be, but I'm sure it will be more than I'm thinking it'll be more than phase 1.
But it's not going to get to the 800,000. we're not gonna spend it. I know we
I hope
kind of
not.
set that as a 10% number
Yeah.
back in November, and I think there's a lot of discussion back in November that seemed very high, at least to me, at least back at that time, and I can't imagine spending 800,000 on guidehouse, at least I hope we don't, so.
I don't necessarily disagree with you. I don't want to spend 800,000, but I also want to make sure that I can be 100% compliant with the grant.
So in that number, the balance, the 896 may very well be more than that, once we're done with guidehouse.
There could be, yes,
Okay.
yes. So the 602 can be added today. The 896 would then potentially have funding left as well.
Mhm.
So once we establish that phase 2 and that not to exceed contract amount, I think we could.
Okay. And then, if I may, Chair, just a quick question on there's still that floating balance of 2.3 million on the public safety payroll. We haven't reported to Treasury, but we are kind of taking it as a project amount. So could we add that 2.3 like mentally to the 8.64 and the balance remaining on ARPA funds? Is that a fair characterization? I mean,
That
just for
is.
our mental use.
That is, so I know this is a discussion item, but those reports are due by January 31st. So I actually have it on my calendar this afternoon to submit that final report to the, and that would actually add to that balance. You're
Right, just want to
exactly
make sure
right.
that the other
Yes.
commissioners know that we have more than 8.6 in ARPA, pure ARPA. And in my estimation, more than 896 in board committed, funds as well. Is that fair?
Yes, I would agree with you there.
Okay.
And in fairness, those two buckets that the remaining funding, there was broadband bucket. And so we did start that initiative with the very beginning with number 2 with the gray bar contract. And I know that DSI, Department of Strategic Impact, was working with that consultant on middle mile broadband and is in the process of putting a plan together about broadband needs. There is potentially other funding, but sometimes having some seed money or to match others. So I know that project was an initiative that just has not made it as quickly as some of the other initiatives were brought forward.
Thank you for reminding us of that. I was going to bring that up also, as we did have that other bucket called broadband.
Broadband and then county funds as well.
Saving dollars, for it, yes.
So, and just as an update, I would say that I know that there are, so if you, under board initiatives, if you look at number 19, for sure, and there are probably others in that lower section. The James Street DHHS building roof, that was a roof that if we acted now, it was on our capital improvement plan and out years, but if we acted now, we were, it could save us a lot of money and full replacement of the roof. And so that $350,000, while it shows spent, these are projects that we are tracking. We have transferred that funds to a capital improvement project to support that initiative. I do believe you're going to probably see that contract on the board agenda along with 2 other roofs because they're working on the procurement of that activity. So these are in various stages. And so while there's contracts for external, internally, the projects are well underway and people are working towards completing them. So there are a number of these that are county that we would have just transferred the money to the appropriate place to account for those.
Kind of coordinating efforts.
Yes.
Commissioner Belknap, did you have a question?
Yes, I did, Madam Chair. Thank you. Karen, just a quick question on the public safety payroll. Is that all public safety personnel that are with the county, or does that go to local units as well?
This is 100% county payroll. So
Okay.
it's not, the goal here was payroll that produced budgetary savings. So it was not that, as you know, the sheriff has a number of contracts with communities, and those are fully funded by those communities. This does not include the contracts.
Okay, So for public safety, it's more than just sheriffs. Is there like ambulance services that come out of that funding as well, or is it?
This is a long period of time of the sheriff. So you're seeing probably a year and a half. So it is 100% sheriffs.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? Commissioner Moss?
Sure. What is the status of the task force itself?
That is a very good question. They canceled the December meeting. We have not met officially since the contracts were underway. I know that when we hired the bucket managers, they were very willing to go through a round 2 of this process if the board so desired to go in that direction.
So if we don't do anything, will the task force meet again? Or does that need to be initiated?
I think that I don't think that we'll meet again unless we take additional action and invite them to meet.
Okay. There's $87,000 for the bucket manager contracts on line 1. Since all of this money was very quickly allocated in a short amount of time, instead of through 2020, the end of 2024, is that remaining bucket manager allocation, does that need to be paid to them still if we're done?
So there were, I'd have to pull out the contract. I'm going from memory, but there were dates in which those payments to be made, and we held the final payment for maybe one of the bucket managers because they were the bucket manager for the ARPA, so for the other 3 projects, and I just didn't feel like we should release that funding, even though they had asked, and I just felt like we hadn't quite met that final objective yet. So we're holding that. Once we meet that objective, then I think those funds could be released.
Would we have an opportunity? I mean, is this a total contracted amount then for the budget managers, or is it based upon kind of job?
Yeah, there were three bucket managers. And so that is a combination of all 3 contracts. And that is a total of what was paid to
What was submitted
What
for
was-
payment or actual contract?
so it was the contracts. So the first column, the project amount would be what was agreed to the contract. And the contract is either paid or still committed in an open purchase order to them.
Can you just remind us again, who those contracts were with and for what amount?
Let's see. I don't know that I have that. I can tell you it was with Housing Next for affordable housing. Lakeshore Advantage for business stabilization. And an organization that was a coming together of the Holland Zealand Community Foundation, the Grand Haven Community Foundation, and United Way that formed Care Ottawa.
Yeah.
Did
I have those numbers if you want them.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I just don't have them.
Commissioner Rhodey, the agreement with Lakeshore Advantage was for 68.6 thousand. Housing Next was 100,000. And then the difference is with, what is that, 30-some thousand
For Care Ottawa.
for Care Ottawa. And my conversations with them is that they're willing to continue working with us. It may be a good idea that we set up a work session and talk with them if we want to continue the work. We are paying them. They are willing to continue working with the existing contract. But that's,
I was wondering if we had that opportunity.
yeah, I think if you want
Something
to,
we might be interested in.
make a sense of maybe next planning, policy, have them come in and just kind of talk with us. My understanding is they are willing to continue working. There was no end date to the contract, so I think we get our money's worth, and if we decide to say, the contract has been paid, the work and our considerations is over, or we want to continue working. And if they continue working on the existing contract, why not?
You might just want an update about the broadband initiative, because I think the broadband initiative could be fairly expensive.
Okay. And maybe we bring the broadband into the same meeting, the three bucket managers plus have Polly there as well in a work session, just kind of see where we all want to go. I mean, this is a new board and there's 12 point something million left over.
The board had made an adjustment in the final approvals, but the remaining funding, when we were tracking it and reporting to the board in November and December, the two remaining balances were sufficient, were I think about 7.5 million for broadband and a remainder for county infrastructure projects. So a number of projects in our capital improvement plan, as you'll be coming more familiar with as we go through the budget process. So I think.
Yeah, no, I definitely get that, but I do think it's fair for the new commissioners to have insight on what the contract with the bucket managers is like, what they're willing to do for us. And definitely have Paul there. He has a good relationship with the contract east, as well as the broadband portion, and just kind of let us all restart, so to speak. I mean, I know we did a lot of work last term, but I want to make sure the new commissioners have an opportunity to kind of reopen the can, so to speak, and kind of go for, in the direction they want to go.
And I think it would be important for Paul to be able to bring us up to date on what the task force did as well, because he was very instrumental in the task force.
I'm almost wondering if there's an opportunity for a report on this until the funds are spent, and I don't know if it's in the finance board forum or if that's something that we want to do at the broader Board of Commissioners.
I think we've got a pretty good report in front of us.
Oh, no, I'm just talking about kind of like a monthly or a quarterly.
think
as
you do
those funds-
quarterly,
We've got $12 million.
So in your fiscal services prepares a quarterly financial report to the board. I could collaborate with Paul and to maybe give an update on the contracts, if maybe include that in your financial quarterly update.
Sounds very good.
I don't know that we'll have one. There's one due, I think, your next finance meeting. I don't know that I would have it for that one, but we could do it for the next quarter.
I've got a couple questions here. The Commissioner Moss was first.
Thanks. So I'm wondering if we could see a list of the projects that were requested or submitted to the ARPA committee. I'm not sure where that request needs to go, but I've received concerns from residents in Ottawa that the representation on the ARPA committee was geographically limited, maybe more so to Holland to Grand Haven than other parts of Ottawa County. So I'd like to see a complete list of all of the requests that were considered by the committee, by the ARPA task force. And I'd also like to see maybe secondarily, if there's a way where this funding has ended up. I'm kind of wondering if Holland and Grand Haven were the bulk representation on the committee. How did the funding get allocated? Did it get allocated to organizations within Holland and Grand Haven, or did the county receive a broader allocation in other geographic areas? So what is the best way to go about requesting those two things?
I think that's information that we have seen, the ARPA task force has seen. I think that information exists. It's just a matter of organizing it and then geographically placing these grants. So I think we probably have the ability, and if we need assistance from the bucket managers, I think we can pull them in for that as well. Because it was something that was discussed early on with the task force.
Commissioner Moss, if I could, I think if you go back to the packet from 11/22, there is a lot of the projects that didn't make it to the task force that were, I think there was like our bucket manager solicited projects, they got some projects in, we weeded those out in a tier 1 and tier 2. Both tiers are in that packet. So if you go back to 11/22, you'll see all the projects that were submitted to our bucket managers. And then, however you want to geographic, I think there's some geographical, obviously, Middle Macatawa Trail System is very geographically tied, right? But there are other projects that are definitely countywide, so.
Okay, 11/22 Finance Committee.
No,
packet,
board meeting.
Board meeting packet.
Yeah.
Packet.
Yep.
Thank you.
Commissioner Rhodey, did you have a question?
Yes, so my question is, were there any significant projects in your view that came in, that are more related to, the county government itself, capital improvement, infrastructure that, you view as important that we should be, considering going forward?
So we did receive a fair number of projects, both from the managers and county, when we asked county departments to submit projects at the same time. There were a lot of merits to a lot of those projects, I suppose, just from a very conservative, maybe selfish. If you've read our budget summary, there are a couple areas within the county that I've noted as areas we're watching and we're trying to fund. So no, we haven't gotten to this part yet, but our capital improvement plan is a 5-year plan. Historically, if you go back a number of years, the county would have excess revenue over expenses at the end of the year, and they would commit that to projects. We have been working in the last few years to streamline that process. So we've been looking to create an ongoing funding mechanism. So taking some of that growth and committing it to maintaining our infrastructure. And so over time, we've also been working on identifying our 5-year plan and working with departments on planning. So we have, as we've gotten better at planning, the demand for resources has also gone up. So we are currently funding that. I think in the 23 budget, there's about a $2.4 million contribution to the capital projects fund to help support the capital improvement plan projects and those 5-year initiatives. Our funding demands exceed that. And I know that there's some master plan activities that we're still working through and getting on that 5-year plan. And with the courthouse coming online and some of those moves internally and making sure those spaces can be ready for continued use when we start making those transitions. So that is why it was our recommendation for the remaining balance to be not necessarily committed to that, but at least until we work through that process and maybe another capital improvement cycle, to make sure that we have all of that accounted for, managed. And then the other initiative that we had been recommending was broadband. And those were the reasons. Those were not the projects that were not submitted to move forward, but there were a number of very good projects there as well.
Just wanted to go back to the conversation between Commissioner Moss and Commissioner Zylstra. I did look up in the November, and I think the one you're referring to, Mr. Zylstra, is the packet is actually missing. It's the only one that's missing online. And so I went into the November 8 one, and the ARPA funds are not discussed in there. So I'm assuming the one you're referring to is probably November 22, but that one's actually not available for us on the website.
There was, yeah, I've seen that before. I think there's, if you go up a line, it should be there.
If
Let me-
you,
let me
if
pull it.
you enter through the calendar,
Yeah, you have to go through. the
as
calendar on
opposed
this
to
one.
through the board of meeting. I know, I couldn't, I always go in through the Board of Commissioners meeting and agendas. The package was so large, it was not, you couldn't click on that link. There is also a link, if you go down to the county calendar and go back to that meeting date, you'll be able to access
Okay.
that packet
Thank you.
I was able to access it that way
to
Okay,
the
from the
calendar. Yeah.
calendar.
okay.
Trying to find calendar. I apologize. Are there any other questions? We'll work on the recommendation to bring back the bucket managers and broadband consultant grade bar in the next agenda.
Madam Chair, you want to do that for February then?
You want to do it for February? I think that would be a good idea, given the number of questions that still remain.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, thank you, Karen. Thank you very much. Although I think overview of budget process was the next one. I'm going to recommend we table that and move it to the next meeting.
I support that.
You'll support that. All right. And then the last thing we were going to cover were scheduling conflicts for meetings. There is a scheduling conflict on 2/14, which is Valentine's Day. Several of us are going to be going to Washington, DC. So returning on that day. And then there is a scheduling conflict for July 4 due to the holiday. So traditionally speaking, I would be open to recommendations as to like when you move it to, or can I go ahead and make that
You just
decision?
want to make that decision,
and
just
then
share.
send it out?
I think that, we've always kind of moved when there's a conflict on
A
Tuesday, moved
day.
to Thursday. And I
Thursday.
think Commissioner Miedema, that was okay, at least on the 16th. I don't know. July is a ways away.
Maybe we can discuss with
Revisit
everyone
this.
and revisit
Revisit.
July later.
Yeah, see what our schedules look like, but I think does February 16 work for everybody?
Yes.
And normally I would say that we ought to just make that a rule that if there's a conflict, that it's usually the Thursday after that.
Thursday after has
That's
been the
always been
tradition.
case.
Okay.
If it works for everybody.
If we set it that way, we'll just assume that is the case. Correct?
Let's continue with the tradition is my recommendation, but it's always subject to a vote too. So Thursday. All right. Okay. So do I have a motion to, do we need to approve the discussion items? It feels like we do. No, we don't?
No.
Absolutely not. Okay, wonderful. So time for public comment. Public comment? All right, doesn't look like we have any further public comment. Do I have a motion to adjourn? So moved. And support? All right. Finance Committee meeting, first one, is adjourning and according to the clock, 11:26. Thank you.